This is Joe Wong. Welcome to the Trap Set. During the age of social distancing, we're recording remotely and releasing episodes almost every day. Today's guest is Julianna Barwick, an artist that uses voice, electronics, and loops to build warm and expansive planets of sound. I was introduced to Julianna by my friend and former guest, Mary Lattimore. Julianna spoke to me from her home in Los Angeles.
Hello.
Hi, Julianna.
Hi.
How are you?
Good. How are you?
Good. What are you up to?
I'm just hanging out, answering some emails. Same old, same old.
How much different is your life right now than it is during non-quarantine times?
Very, very different. Very different. I usually have some kind of plan for nighttime, whether it's a show or dinner or something. So that's been like the most drastic change, I think, for me. But other than that, and when I'm not on tour, if I'm home, it's not wholly different than normal. Get up in the morning, have coffee and internet for a while, and then see people at night. So seeing people at night is the only thing that's really different right now.
Have you been doing any Zoom meetings or FaceTiming with friends?
Oh, yeah. I've been doing a little of that, like some Zoom dinners with people and, FaceTiming my parents. I've been FaceTiming with my nephew and reading to him. And just last week, he read to me for the first time a whole book. So that was very exciting. So, yeah, trying to find ways to stay connected to people, for sure.
My 2-year-old niece calls me to play peekaboo almost every night before she goes to bed.
How would that work? Does it work?
I cover the camera and then put my face really close to it, and there you go. She thinks it's the most fun game ever.
Of course. Kids that age love hide and seek.
Did you grow up in Louisiana?
I did, but just till I was 5. And then we started moving around a little bit. But yeah, my whole family's from there. Then we moved to Springfield, Missouri for a few years. And then we moved to Tulsa when I was about 13. And then I moved to New York when I was about 21 or so.
Were you in Tulsa from 13 to 21?
Yeah.
Is that where your parents still are?
Yeah.
Cool.
Yeah.
What did they do that caused the family to move around so much?
My dad was a youth minister back then. So he was a youth minister for a while at that church in Louisiana, and then he was a youth minister at a church in Missouri, and then he decided to go to med school. So that's what brought us to Tulsa.
When you were growing up, were you a pretty religious person?
Well, I mean, I kind of didn't really have a choice. I mean, we went to church 3 times a week. And, my dad was the youth minister, which meant he did all the stuff for the kids. So all the way from babies to college kids, he did summer camps and weekend retreats and ski trips and, Bible studies and you name it. It's just like, so we were constantly active in the church.
Was it an evangelical church?
Yes, it was a church called Church of Christ. So it was very kind of conservative Christian vibes.
Were you a believer as a child?
Yes. Well, yes, as a kid, but I think when I became like a teen age, I think starting like around 11, I kind of started to question everything. And, like thinking about science, for instance. And I think a big thing for me was the mixed messages I couldn't get past, like, don't judge anybody, but we don't like these groups of people. You know what I mean?
Right.
And I could not get down with that. I just thought, I'm just not going to live my life not liking groups of people for whatever they are. It's just not going to happen. So needless to say, I had to keep going to church and stuff through high school, but after that it was not so much.
Was church the first place where you were around live music?
Well, in an odd kind of way, because, we sang as a congregation at every service. So Sunday morning, Sunday night, Wednesday night. But it was a cappella because that was the thing that the Church of Christ believes in. It's like no instruments.
Huh. What's the reason for that?
I'm not sure. I mean, maybe there's a verse in the Bible or something that says something about that and it stuck. I don't actually even remember. But yeah, the no instruments, just voice and like clapping or stomping or whatever, But, I mean, that obviously like totally informed my love of music and my love of the human voice, especially in reverberant spaces and with harmonies stacked and rounds and things like that. Hearing that from birth really, informed one of the ways that I love to hear sound and make sound. So that's good.
Did you study an instrument?
In elementary school, I took clarinet.
Me too.
Really?
Yeah.
That's so awesome.
I still have one.
I do too, and it needs to be recorked. And I tried to buy a kit. I tried to buy a kit from Amazon and do it myself, and it was a disaster. So I'm going to leave it to the professionals once that opens back up.
Yeah.
But I love the sound of a clarinet. I'd love to get that fixed soon. But did clarinet. That was like 5th, 6th, 7th grade, something like that. And then, but I was in choirs in elementary school and junior high and high school. And then I was in an opera chorus after high school in Tulsa. So did a lot of choral singing my whole life.
Do you still do it? Are you in any choirs right now?
No, and I know that there are some here in LA that friends of mine have participated in, but I have not yet. But I would love to do that, actually.
Me too.
Yeah. Yeah,
There's a
I'll have
church
to.
down the street from my house, and I was almost thinking of just trying to join the choir there, even though I'm not a church person.
I've thought of that too. I've thought about doing that too. I mean, not only that, not only to experience the, the wonderful feeling of singing with a choir, but I mean, also, I still deeply love a lot of the hymns I grew up singing, Um, some of them are so slow and beautiful and mournful, and the happy ones too are great. But yeah, even just to sing those again would be a trip.
When did you start thinking of being a musician as central to who you are rather than just something that you did?
Well, I I think the real turning point was this tour I ended up doing late 2007. Um, so I went to school in college in New York. I did darkroom photography. So that's what my degree is in, studio art.
Where did you go to school?
Hunter College. Yeah, in Manhattan. And but I was always tinkering with music stuff at home. And finally, in like 2005, a friend of mine loaned me a little guitar pedal that looped. And that's how I made my first record, is just from the like combustion of excitement and expression I found through that pedal. And I recorded everything onto tape and had all of that stuff, and decided to put it on MySpace, and then eventually figured out how to put it out on an actual like CD that wasn't a CDR, and was invited to go play in Lisbon and London in like late September 2007, and I went and I did that, not having played outside of New York City. And that trip, I like took me to where I am today. Basically, like everything snowballed from there. Like a thing that I did over there in Lisbon ended up being featured on Pitchfork, and then labels were interested, and I mean, just on and on and on. From there is like how it all kind of started, because I got home and I'd actually like made money even. And no one knew who I was, and I went over there with a suitcase with no wheels. It was like a total, I mean, like I did not know what I was doing. I was sweating so much dragging this suitcase around with no wheels, and selling CDs out of the suitcase and all that stuff. But I got home and I'd actually made a little money, and some great things had happened. And I'd been working in a photo studio where I was pretty miserable. And so, January 2008, I got a nanny job and ditched the miserable photo studio job and just decided to go for it from there.
When you were in school, was your ambition to become, a fine art photographer?
Yeah, actually. I mean, that would have been awesome. I still love darkroom, well, photography in general, but darkroom photography. I haven't done it in so long.
Do you still have an enlarger or any
I still
processing
have all
stuff?
of it.
You
It's
do?
so funny. It's so funny that you mentioned this, because literally a few days ago, I went and did a little distanced trade for some film for my friend Rachel Cassells, who's an amazing photographer. She did Mary's press photos.
Mary
for the last
Lattimore.
record. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, those are great photos.
Yeah, beautiful, beautiful, beautiful work. So we did a little trade a few days ago, a little distance hang, and she gave me some film because I did have a 35 millimeter camera that blew up. Like the batteries exploded in it and just never, never, got back to where it used to be. And I got a new 35 millimeter for my birthday last year. Hadn't really played around with it. And I still have all of my darkroom stuff from high school because my dad taught me darkroom photography at our house in the bathroom when I was in high school because his dad taught him. So it was kind of a family thing. And I carried all of that stuff with me to New York, moved a bunch of times since 2001, obviously. And I still have all my stuff, my trays, my tongs. Some of the stuff was my grandpa's. A lot of the stuff is my dad's. So it's very sentimental to me, of course. But in this weird pandemic time, I've been feeling like just so weirdly unenthused and unmotivated about making music.
Mm-hmm. I can relate to that. And I think lots of the people that have been on this show in the last month have expressed a similar sentiment.
I've been hearing that from most of my musician friends, so that's good to know. I mean, I definitely don't feel alone in that at all. But it's funny, I thought, well, what I would really love to do, what would be great for me creatively would be to get back into some darkroom photography. So I'm going to get on Amazon pretty soon now that I've got my film and get on Amazon or, I don't think any of the stores around LA are open, but I'm going to check and order all my chemicals, my Microdol X and my Dectol and all that stuff and set it up here. I think that would be a really wonderful way to not express myself, but like use this time and do something creative. And it's exciting because I haven't set up my little darkroom in 15 years. So kind of stoked on that. I didn't have goals or ambitions really. Excuse me. I didn't really have like intentions of any kind, and it did totally unfold naturally. I found, of course, I'd been obsessed with Bjork since I was like 13, 14, and had so many musical obsessions and, just really loved music. That was my true love, but I wasn't thinking like, what kind of sound can I do to get noticed? And I want to be, I want to be like, a popular singer person. It was just so kind of totally natural, the way everything happened. I mean, once I started making the loopy things in 2005 and 6, it just clicked, and I finally found a way to make music that didn't feel labored. I loved how like kind of instant it was, and I didn't have to compose ahead of time, and it just kind of like surprised me magically as I went. I loved that. I loved the quickness of it. I was never thinking like, oh, this is cool. Now, hopefully this will be for real, for real. I had no idea what was going to happen.
What does for real even mean?
Like being a musician for real, like I am now. Like that wasn't.
What's the difference between what your life is like now and what it was like back then?
Well, I mean, back then I was babysitting like 10, 11, 12 hours a day. I hooked up with an extremely cool family that would come home a little early if I had a show at Mercury Lounge or whatever in those first few years. But, eventually it became for real, and I didn't need a side hustle anymore. So that's what that meant to me, Yeah.
Once you didn't have a side hustle anymore, did it change your relationship with the music you were making in any way?
I don't think so. I think that everything that I've made through the years has sort of been kind of a natural progression, to me at least. It just kind of like, on the last record I did this, and then something kind of new evolves, It's just been, pretty natural progression.
Has the way that you've written evolved over the years?
For sure. In the beginning, when I was making Sanguine, my first record, that was like completely improvised loops into a Fostex 4-track cassette, recorder. And I would kind of maybe layer some stuff on top of those loops. But it was all on cassette tape. And then, starting with like Fluorine, I figured out how to use GarageBand because I went to the Apple store in Soho for some, GarageBand seminar thing or free workshop.
I used to have a sublet over by that Apple store.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
In Soho?
Uh-huh.
Oh, wow. Yeah. That's where I had my first job when I moved to New York in 2001, was at a hair salon in Soho. So that was one of my favorite neighborhoods. Still is.
You do hair too?
Oh, no. I answered phones at a hair salon. That was my first job in New York.
Got it.
Which was a trip because it's like where all the supermodels went and actors and actresses, and it was like,
that's what I like to call the best of humanity.
Oh,
the best of us.
Oh yeah, I promise no one ever made me cry at that job. Not, but yeah, but it was kind of trippy and awesome, to have just come from like working at Spaghetti Warehouse in Tulsa, Oklahoma, and then helping Christy Turlington get her credit card out of her wallet. It's a trip.
Wait, why did she need help getting a card out of the wallet?
Oh, because her nails were still wet from her manicure.
Gotcha.
Yeah, so it was kind of fun. There was like definitely a novelty and all that, but yeah. So Sanguine, Fluorine, The Magic Place, I did 100% on my own with no one around.
And The Magic Place was your first LP.
Yeah, on Asthmatic Kitty. But yeah, just up to mastering, I did all of those by myself. And then I got my email from Alex Summers in like January 2011. And he was just like, hey, I really like your stuff so much. Like, would you want to record together? And I got so excited because he meant record something in Iceland, which as like a huge, fanatic for Bjork and Sigur Rós, I was just like, wow. And I got so excited and I answered immediately. I was like, yes, let's just try and make this happen. Alex and Yonzi have the Rice Boy Sleeps record, which is, a modern classic. So yeah, Alex does a lot of stuff, and now Alex is doing a lot of movie scoring and stuff. And I didn't know him at all when I got that email, and I was, freaked out a little bit because I was like, oh, but that means someone will hear me in my process and like when I'm figuring stuff out, and I don't know how I feel about that. It seems like that will be really weird. And then he was in New York for some reason at some point in 2011, and we met up, and I was just like, I fell in love instantly, just like everyone does. And I was like, oh yeah, we clicked. This is going to be so great. He's just so awesome and kind and adorable. This is going to be awesome. And we made plans for me to come in spring of 2012. So that's what I did. And, that was the first time someone had their eyeballs or ears on me as I was doing my thing. And, I think because it was Alex, it worked. And that's when I was introduced to collaborating and having someone record me. Because, he also organized a day for us to record Amina on strings, and then some teenage girls singing on a couple songs. So yeah, I mean, with every album, this is like the most long, tangential answer to your question 10 minutes ago, but with every record, there's been kind of something new, something incorporated, especially since then. I mean, with Will, which came out in 2016. So the album I made with Alex was Nepenthe. That came out August 2013. And then I made Will all by myself. But I had demoed a Moog Mother 32. So the guys at Moog taught me how to use a Moog Mother 32, and a couple of the things that I came up with whenever they taught it to me ended up being on Will, and they asked me if I wanted to come to Asheville and use their sound lab to record some stuff for the record, and I did that in July 2015. So I'm just illustrating the point that, through people I've met in different just circumstances, that's ended up lending to the sound of every record I've put out since the beginning.
What about your relationship to your music? How did you feel about the recordings that you first made when you heard them played back?
Joy.
And how do you feel about them now when you hear them?
Joy. And that's a deep, deep emotional connection. I mean, when I make music, it's usually just spilling out, in the moment, just improv. So I don't write things out ahead of time, just kind of jam. And that's usually the thing that sticks. And so it's just, it's pure emotion. So whatever I'm feeling in the moment is reflected in how it sounds. And so it will really resonate with myself on an emotional level. But at the core of what I do is just the complete joy I have when I hear music, when I make music, when I sing, preferably with reverb, lots and lots of it. But there's a joy there, and that's the reason why I didn't want to do music in college. And everyone was like, "What? You're not doing music in college?" And I just thought, and I'm so glad that I made this decision 18, is that I didn't want to ever dread making something, making a piece, composing. I didn't want to have any kind of, dread or feelings of, ugh, I don't want to do this. It's due on Monday though, so I have to do it, I wanted to like let that part of me exist without being, trained to an extent, because I knew that would make me very happy.
Did you dread turning in photography projects when you were in college?
I didn't. I actually didn't.
So maybe you wouldn't have dreaded turning in, compositions if you went to music school.
I don't know. I feel like maybe I would have.
Well, I'm just playing the devil's advocate, because I did go to music school, and there was certainly dread involved, and it certainly also drew me away from that joy that you're describing and made me question everything. And ultimately, it is what it is, and I took what I could from it. But it definitely distanced me from that kind of visceral connection to music for a while.
Definitely. And, in the past couple years, I've had to write like actual pieces with actual score, which of course I hired a notist to do that, because I don't remember how to, write music out, and it would take me hours and hours to figure it out, and it would be a mess. But, I was asked to make some music for the Ecstatic Music Festival in New York a couple years ago, and then a piece for Wild Up for a concert that happened last summer.
And for folks that don't know, Wild Up is a new music collective based here in LA.
Yeah. And I had to familiarize myself again with writing music and staying in time, and it can't be loose. When I performed with Wild Up, it was like June 1st last year, the noon to midnight concert they had at the Disney Hall. It was one of the most nervous times I've ever had. Because when I play a show that's just my music from my albums and that style, I don't get nervous. Because anything can happen, and that's fine. Even if something bad happens, that's fine. It's totally chill. But when it's written music and you have these wonderfully talented musicians relying on you to stay in time, it's a whole different ball of wax, but also just so wonderfully like satisfying and in a different way. But yeah, definitely two different sides of my brain working there.
It's interesting because I am more comfortable using the left side of my brain when I'm writing music. I write lots of music for film and TV, and that's almost like solving a puzzle to me in a way. You're looking at the picture, which then kind of implies a rhythm, and then you're listening to the dialogue, which is kind of like a melody on its own, and you're supporting what's happening on screen, and you're supporting the director's vision, and you put all these things together, and it's like putting a puzzle together. And then in the end, you're not the arbiter of whether or not what you're doing is working, which in some ways is annoying, but in most ways it offloads that ultimate responsibility from your shoulders, and you can just have fun. But then when I make my own songs, that's when my critical voice enters the equation. and I've only recently started doing that. like as a solo artist, I've been in plenty of bands, but I've only recently started putting out my own music and singing, and it's terrifying.
Yeah, I mean, I think that for me, I was never in a band or a collective of any kind. I mean, not since the opera chorus when I was 18, 19. So, I started out as like, hermity music making girl, and then had to kind of, ramp it up and have the courage and strength to, perform with other people. But I've been, exercising that muscle a little bit more and more over the years, even from, making a record with, Alado Negro, Roberto, Rafael Irisari, or, those kinds of collaborations where the stakes aren't as high as like performing with Wild Up, or I made music for a ballet company called Ballet Collective in New York and played live with them, and that was extremely nerve-wracking. But I feel like the more you can kind of like train yourself to trust yourself, that it's going to be okay, So I feel like you and I kind of had like sort of an opposite experience in that way.
Right. But I think the common thing is that the more you can push yourself into those scary situations, the more rewarding it is. And
I
more
think
exciting.
That's the word I've been trying to find here. I was like, satisfying is not really the word I'm looking for, but yes, definitely rewarding is the feeling for sure.
Do you have a strong inner critical voice?
Not with music. Maybe in other parts of my life.
Really?
Yeah.
That's so interesting. So what parts of your life do you hear that internal critic?
Oh, well, like if I don't know, like if I drop something, or if I don't get something, if I don't complete an application correctly, or, something like that, I'll, really be like, why, why can't you get it together, but the way I treat myself around music I've always been pretty kind to myself, and it's weird because I haven't really thought about this way. So it's interesting that you asked, because it's fun to think about.
What about with photography? Is that different?
Different. Totes different. Because with photography, it was never like super loose for me. My goal in photography was always to make a perfectly composed. I and still am very much into portraits. That's my thing. I love it. But there's a lot of forethought with that. You are like, what kind of film should I use? What kind of light should I use? What kind of subject should I use? What should the composition be? Do I want it to be super contrasty or no? You're like setting it all up in your mind, like steps in advance. And with music, I feel like I am just using a completely different like part of my brain and soul when I approach music. It's like I sit down at the piano and just start playing around, or I plug in my vocal looper and start playing around. It's just coming straight from my soul, It's pretty different. I've always known that about myself. And, when people find out that is my college degree, I think, oh, well, you must be really visual. Like when you write music, you must be really like visually imagining something or picturing something. And that is totally untrue. It is really weird how the way I approach photography and music could not be different.
What would happen if you tried to shoot some photos with the same mindset that you use when you're writing music?
I don't know. I feel like I wouldn't be too stoked on the results, honestly. I mean, I'm just thinking about it as you're asking me. I'm thinking about it, and like, if I approached photography with some kind of fluidity or some kind of abstract mindset, I just can't picture myself loving the results. Is that weird?
No, it's not. But I was just curious because certainly people approach making music in the same way that you described making photographs, right?
Right.
Like there's certain people that map everything out ahead of time in their mind, and they, in the same way that, you know, you're thinking about which type of film you'd like to use, they're thinking about what kind of tape they want to record to, and thinking of it as a, you know, using the technical minutia as an entryway into whatever they want to express.
Right. Yeah, that's the part of my brain that, like, that's why I knew that making music in college, and you know, that's why I struggled for a very long time until I borrowed that little looper.
Mm-hmm.
You know, I was trying to I was trying to be Cat Power or something, you know, or trying to be Tori Amos, or not really trying to be that, but like I loved them. And then I was like, well, where's my thing? What am I good at? And I would try the like electric guitar with effects and, you know, the kind of Cat Power style thing. And it just wasn't, it wasn't clicking. And I've never been a lyricist, obviously. So it just wasn't feeling right. The shoe just didn't fit. And then suddenly with the looping thing, it just, you know, everything clicked because I was able to make something pretty instantly. And it was emotional and it was fun. And I didn't have to like labor over it too much and get bored. So, yeah.
What do you think about most throughout the day?
People, my relationships with people, probably.
What was the first thought that went through your mind this morning?
What was it? Well, I woke up and I looked at my phone, and then my boyfriend brought me a cup of coffee. So it started pretty great.
Do you sleep with your phone next to your bed?
I do, but it's on silent. My phone is always on silent. Always. But I just keep it, I just charge it overnight next to me. And then I can see what time it is when I start waking up.
What are you working on right now creatively?
Well, see, that's the kind of funny thing is, literally the week before, most of us went into like quarantine, which this is week 7 for me. I finished work on a new record, and I I finished work on a movie score thing I was working on. And so, literally the week before we started doing this. And I think that has something to do with my kind of just being like, I don't feel like doing music. Because I was very, very much like doing a lot of music stuff for the first couple months of this year.
Aside from returning to photography, are there any new creative ambitions that you'd like to explore?
So, a million things. A million bazillion things. I'd love to be a better cook. I'm kind of the pasta queen at this point. And I would love to expand my horizons with cooking.
Now's a good time to experiment with that.
I have been. So that's exciting. I love drawing and painting, but I just have never done a ton of it. So I want to develop those things that I love to do more. I would love to adventure more and see more of the world. Hopefully that happens sooner than later. Physical activities. I'd love to be comfortable on a skateboard again after 25 years. Things like that. That's one thing I love about this world and humans is there's always something to learn.
Yeah, it must have been interesting to see your dad completely change gears as far as a career and go from being a youth minister to being an MD.
That is definitely one of the most inspirational moments of my life. And I can't help but just tell that to people. I feel like I end up telling people that quickly after I meet them, because someone will say what do your parents do? And then the story comes or whatever. And now that I'm approaching the age he was when he began that whole journey, I just have so much respect for him for pivoting like that and preparing for that huge move, because he had to take lots of prereqs, zoology, anatomy, that kind of thing, to prepare to go to med school and to apply to go to med school. And the whole thing, and he loves it. He loves being a doctor. It's
my girlfriend is a doctor, by the way.
Yeah. It's a wonderful thing. It fits his constitution completely. And I feel that way about myself with being a musician. There simply is nothing out there that could fit what I'm made of better than this. And I feel like that's it for him for sure.
The cool thing is that that you can change your mind.
That's exactly it. Precisely. That's the thing that it taught me the most is you can do whatever you want to in this life if you want it bad enough. If you can do anything. It may be extremely hard. It was extremely hard for him. He had to keep his nose in a book for years. That sucks. Nobody wants to do that, but you gotta if that's what you want to do. And I just have so much respect for people. I just watched the Other Music documentary a week and a half ago, and someone said something like, real admiration comes from knowing that whatever someone does, it took them hours and hours and years of practicing that thing to get to be what they are, So that's kind of part of it too, is that dedication, you have to just keep going, keep trying. Same with skateboarding or learning how to play a guitar or whatever. You just it just, so many hours goes into being able to do that thing. And that's really impressive, you know?
But there's also something to be said about taking that and then moving it 1 degree away from whatever you were training on. So, for example, you had studied clarinet and you had sung in choirs, but by the time you made your first solo EP, you'd really only been using the looper for a relatively short amount of time, right?
Definitely. Yeah.
All of the skills that you had developed on the other instruments and in other venues came to bear on that, and it was new enough that it wasn't tethered to a tradition and you didn't feel like you had to get good enough in order to be qualified to have a voice.
Totally. Yeah, I mean, in that way, that was kind of like just kind of like an automatic combustion of everything. But I feel like where my heart was in music my whole life, you know, was kind of like building up to that point. And then that was like me graduating or something. I don't know, you know, just like, oh, wow, like I'm here. But yeah, I mean, that point in my life was definitely like a really, really, it was a very quick moment. And then it was off from there.
Has there been another moment that severe in the subsequent years?
When I played with Yoko Ono, that was just like the craziest, mind-bending, rewarding, otherworldly, absolutely sick with nerves that I've ever been. But
tell me about that. Yeah, tell me about how that opportunity came about and how it felt.
Yeah. So this was like August 2015, and she had some Plastic Ono Band shows at the MoMA to close her one-woman show she had at the MoMA. And we had the same manager. And I want to say, and I don't think I'm exaggerating, like a week before the shows, he asked me if I would play piano for the shows. And it was 2 shows, some weekend in August 2015. And I was like, well, obviously, yes, I would love to play piano for Yoko Ono, but like, I'm not a pianist. I can't even read music well anymore, you know, and here we are in New York City where there's like a million people that are way more qualified to do that. But, you know, I obviously wanted to make that happen because Yoko. And I said, okay, I'm down. How does this work? Like, what songs? And he sent me 3 songs. And I said, great. Do you have sheet music? And he said, no, but do you think you can like figure it out by ear? I was like, mm-hmm. In a week. So through like a YouTube clip of one song and then like getting the other 2 songs off like iTunes or whatever, I taught myself. I like had earphones going into my laptop where the song was, and then I had headphones over my earphones going into my Nord. And, you know, pausing, rewinding, and picking it out note for note by ear. 3 songs. Taught them to myself. And then went into rehearsal with Yoko Ono. And it was very nerve-wracking. She didn't like the way that the Nord sounded. And, you know, she was reassured that it would not be a Nord in the performance. It would be a grand piano. That would sound much better. But we got through rehearsal and I played with her and didn't mess up. But it was insane. It was insane. And there was like Alan Licht on guitar. Eric Friedman was playing. So, just like legends in their own rights. And then, Yoko. And
well, earlier you said something that I wanted to flag, which is that you were in New York and there were several other musicians who were better qualified to play piano for this performance than you.
Right.
And I think by that you meant that there were plenty of virtuosic piano players that can do whatever. But my question is, what is it, when you said yes, you have to acknowledge to yourself probably that there's something that you're uniquely qualified to offer, bringing to the table in order to feel okay performing with somebody like that. So what is it? How did you justify it to yourself?
I just saw it as probably a once in a lifetime opportunity that I just had to make happen.
Mm-hmm.
And just being in awe of like, how did I get here? How in the world did I get here in this moment where I'm being offered an opportunity to play piano with Yoko Ono performing? Like, how did I get here? So obviously this is a gift from the universe and I have to do everything it takes to make it happen.
This conversation has been a gift from the universe.
It has?
I think so. I mean, we got to spend an hour talking to each other.
Yeah.
And there's a global pandemic happening.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
But we're both safe and we both have telephones that are working. And there's a lot of things that point me to that statement. So, Julianna, thank you so much for being on the show.
Thanks for having me. I really enjoyed your questions. Breath of fresh air.
No pun intended, right?
Right.
No offense to Terry Gross.
Definitely not.
She's the queen.
For sure.
All right, I'm going to stop the
The Trap Set is produced by me, Joe Wong, along with Chris Karwowski, who also edits the program. Follow us on Twitter, Instagram, and Facebook at The Trap Set, and visit our website, thetrapset.net, to subscribe to our show for free. If you enjoyed what you heard today, please donate to our show. If you can't afford to donate, please tell a friend and give us a good rating on iTunes. Send your feedback and guest requests to thetrapset@gmail.com.